The clock ticked past 10 with that annoying regularity it has on mornings when he's gone. 10:30, and the house felt emptier than usual. I should be used to it by now, all those business tricks adding up to more nights alone than not. But this time, a funny sense of unease had settled over me instead of the usual boredom. Another coffee seemed like a good idea. Maybe I'd get ambitious, finally tackle those dusty bookshelves. Nah, son, not literary critique, was definitely calling my name. I headed out back, the daily battle with myself already starting. Bikini too obvious. Robe, played it safe too long. Ah, hell with it. That emerald green one piece always made me feel like a 50s pin-up. Today, a little extra vavavoom was precisely what the doctor ordered. There he was, skimming the pool. The new guy. It had been what, almost a week now since he started? Something about his smile made me blurt out, about keeping me company. The first time we met. Not my usual style, that's for sure. But then again, neither was this restless feeling buzzing in my veins. We talked and talked. Turns out, college kid, working summers, normal stuff. Yet, normal hadn't felt this good in ages. And those little glances he was throwing my way today? Maybe it was the swimsuit. Hey, a girl can hope. But there was a definite spark I hadn't seen since. Damn, when was the last time? Then Jenna waltzed in for lunch, all smiles and perfectly manicured claws subtly digging in. Darling, you look radiant. It suits you. The way she lingered on, radiant, was practically a flashing neon sign. Had she noticed something? Did she know? That damn competitive glint in her eye. Always there. Always making me wonder just how much of a friend she really was. Later, as he was finishing up, I pretended to mess with the lounge chairs. Shirtless. Seriously, the man was sculpted. I was about to invent a problem with the pool filter, just to keep him around, when a wave of nausea guilt something hit me. What the hell was I doing? That night, the too familiar beep of my husband's call echoed in the cavernous house. Busy week, babe. Sorry it's late. Same old updates, barely paying attention to my replies. The quick, obligatory, love you, before hanging up felt like a punch to the gut more than usual. Mirror time. Who even was this woman? Staring back with a mix of defiance and disgust in her eyes. My body, sure, it still had something. But my heart? The yearning I felt for a pool boy. The pathetic way I was hanging on his polite smiles. Was I really going to let boredom and a fading marriage turn me into this? It wasn't even a real decision, more like a switch flipping deep down. Tomorrow, back to sensible cover-ups and polite conversation. Tomorrow, I start taking back a piece of myself. But damn, tonight, I let myself drown a little in the fantasy, because who knows when a girl's gonna get this kind of excitement again. The rain had turned into a full-blown summer freakout. Those fat, angry drops that sound like they want to punch a hole in the roof. He was soaked to the bone when he practically flew onto my patio. I tossed him the beach towel from the chaise, the one with the goofy flamingo pattern that always makes me smile. Eyes met over that ridiculous pink bird, and the air crackled. It wasn't even a question, really, more like something inevitable. Want some iced tea? Might as well wait this out. My voice sounded a little too breezy, even to my own ears. And there we were, perched on kitchen stools. God, my kitchen, with its stupid granite countertops and the overpriced blender my husband surprised me with last year, had never felt so alien. Him sitting there, his laugh echoing off the polished tiles. It was like something from a bad rom-com, the one where the middle-aged housewife loses her damn mind over the pool boy. Except, deep down, I wasn't laughing. The rain stopped, and that same goofy formality kicked back in. Gotta finish up, Mrs. B. He was practically out the door when my hand landed on his arm. My own boldness startled me. This wasn't me? Or was it? Who the hell was I anymore anyway? This question, is this a really bad idea, hung between us. The truth, or at least my version of it, burned in my throat. It's been a bad idea for years, letting things with my husband wither into this stale, brittle nothing. Letting myself fade away into a euro what? A bored housewife with too much time on her hands? But words failed. Instead, the answer was my mouth on his, the feel of his hands urgent on my waist. Afterwards, that word felt so clinical. Like I wasn't sprawled in a tangle of limbs and leftover desire on my kitchen floor, but some lab specimen under a microscope. A spike of panic twisted next to the lingering embers of excitement. Had we just detonated my world? His eyes, usually so open and friendly, held shadows I couldn't decipher. It wasn't regret, though. Not exactly. Maybe it was the same flicker of something dangerous I was feeling. We both knew it couldn't just be forgotten. I mumbled some nonsense about a Euro mistakes, and we played out the charade. Him back to pull chemicals, me to pretending life hadn't tilted on its axis. But with every brush of his hand, every stolen glance between customers, it was clear. We couldn't just hit rewind. Jenna's call was almost a relief, an excuse to be busy, unavailable. I dodged her invite with some lame excuse about a headache. Her tone, that practiced sympathy with a dash of, I know something's up. Lord, I hadn't perfected my poker face yet. Sleep? Ha! Each time I drifted. His eyes flashed in the darkness, hot and hungry. My body, usually so predictable, now thrummed with a strange mixture of guilt and a restless thrill I couldn't name. The sound of the garage door opening sliced through my haze. My husband, back to his predictable routine. Each cheery word he chirped about deals and traffic was like a nail scraping across exposed nerves. Had this gulf between us always been this wide? Or had it opened, chasm-like, the moment my lips touched another man's? The damn pool chair was crooked again. At least, that's the excuse I told myself, fiddling with it until I heard the familiar rumble of the pool truck pulling up. Each invented task near the pool was like a countdown to a bomb I couldn't defuse, but couldn't look away from, either. We hadn't really talked about that day. Just coded gestures, silent agreements masked by the mundane tasks of pool cleaning. A lingering touch as he handed me a bottle of sunscreen. A quick glance at the house before leaning in close to whisper about a filter issue. Our eyes had become their own language. Each stolen moment a brushstroke on a canvas we both knew could ignite. My body had turned traitor. Everything was about him. That stupid faded tee he always wore to work suddenly held some forbidden allure. My closet became my battleground. Bolder colors, slightly shorter skirts, less comfortable housewife. More a woman who knew the power her curves still held. The thrill of him noticing, the tiny jolt visible in him before he schooled his features, fueled a fire in me I thought had long ago banked to embers. My husband returned from another trip, all chipper success and practiced affection. I raised an imaginary champagne flute in my head, making a silent toast to this charade, to the fact that I now saw his touch as a phantom compared to the raw, urgent grip of calloused poolboy hands. Jenna stopped by, my husband mentioned, too casually. Of course she did. My nemesis had radar when it came to sensing shifts in the social landscape. She likely smelled a change in me, some note in my voice that betrayed a secret thrill I wasn't fully hiding anymore. Dinner at their place was hell, not because of any overt drama, but the 1,000 tiny cuts of normalcy. Jenna's husband, all harmless flirtation and easy smiles towards me, while I longed for the stolen glances only the pool boy shared. And when Jenna mentioned seeing him at some grocery store, her emphasis on pool boy was a stiletto to my ribs. Not quite accusation, but definitely a declaration of war. His truck left my street early the next day. Routine? Or was something else going on? Doubt? A monster I hadn't wrestled with in years, gnawed at me. I needed, what? Proof? Reassurance that I held some unique place in his world. That our stolen moments weren't just a hot fling to break up the boredom of summer work? Tailing him was an act of sheer lunacy, yet I did it. My sensible SUV a ridiculous contrast to his beat-up old truck. And when he stopped at that run-down little apartment complex, a place that screamed, struggling college student, and not, secret love nest, a part of me shattered. My fantasy of his life, of his interest in me, had blinded me. An hour, maybe two. I lost track of time. Parked down the block, the simmering jealousy and nauseating knot in my gut. When he walked out, the woman with him. Oh, she was pretty enough, the carefree kind of young you can only be at 20-something. Their easy laughter, the casual sling of his arm around her. It was everything I wanted, and more importantly, everything my stale marriage was not. Jealousy, hot and unexpected, flared. Not at a wife betrayed, but at a girl so effortlessly possessing what I'd become desperate for. I didn't want to be some dirty secret anymore. It was pathetic. I deserved more. But did I deserve anything good at all? The question rattled me to my core. His excuse that night was the same mumbled BS as always. Some complicated story about helping her, doing her a favor. I didn't even care about the lie. It was the simple fact of the lie. The realization that he, just like me, compartmentalized his life, kept secrets. My husband's sleeping form beside me seemed foreign, the scent of his fancy aftershave a mockery. Yet, even in the darkness, a reckless thrill coursed through me. He had played me, underestimated me. Now, with exquisite clarity, I saw him, and with that sight came a power I'd long forgotten I had. The coffee shop had always been neutral territory, a place for Jenna and me to pretend we weren't engaged in a perpetual power struggle for the title of Queen of the Cul-de-sac. Yet today, the air between us practically crackled with unspoken accusations. "You seem different," Jenna chirped, her smile brittle. "Is everything all right? It's not like you to forget your usual order." Every word was a minefield, and she knew exactly where to step. I countered with a laugh, a touch too loud. "Goodness, Jenna, a girl changes her lipstick, and it's cause for concern? Maybe I'm just tired of being so predictable." The lie was smooth, practiced. It almost fooled even me. I was different, edgier, less concerned with keeping up appearances. My power walks had become less about fitness and more about strategically timed laps of the pole while you worked. Our affair was no longer just a rebellion, it was a weapon, and I was getting damn good at wielding it. My husband had noticed, too. The extra questions, the sideways glances when I chatted too long with the pool boy about some non-existent leaf pile. He was starting to circle, the betrayed predator sensing a trap. The weekend trick proposal was almost laughable. His last-ditch effort to fix something he didn't even know was broken. My mind buzzed, not with romantic possibilities, but with the logistics of another stolen tryst under my oblivious husband's nose. It was a sickness, an addiction, and I was hooked. The dress, the hated dress, clung in all the right places. The one my husband thought cheap, the one the pool boy couldn't take his eyes off. It was my armor as I walked back into that damn cabin. The code text came. A jolt that overrode even the buzz of the pre-dinner wine. Feigned clumsiness. Oops, forgot my sunscreen, and I slipped back out into the summer dusk. His urgency bordered on desperation. We both knew how high the stakes were now. There was a recklessness fueled by the growing awareness that any of this could blow sky high at any moment. Back in the cabin, the air was thick with suspicion masquerading as cheer. My husband played his cards carefully, little comments about my glow, his hand lingering a touch too long on my shoulder. Yet, the game had shifted. I no longer shied away, met his gaze boldly. The thrill of outsmarting him was far more intoxicating than any touch the pool boy could provide. Sleep evaded me. Was it the guilt, or the dark thrill of it all finally outweighing the shame? Had I truly become this woman, a saboteur of her own life? Yet, when my phone vibrated with another text from Jenna, a simple, "Coffee tomorrow?" the fear was usurped by a cold resolve. This was no longer about a summer fling. This was about taking control of my life, shattering the damn cul-de-sac mold I'd been shoehorned into for far too long. Walking into that same coffee shop the next morning felt like stepping onto a battlefield. Jenna was waiting, and her eyes told me she'd drawn first blood. But the war was far from over. "So," Jenna purred, her perfectly manicured nails circling the rim of her coffee cup, "tell me about the pool boy." It was the verbal equivalent of a knife poised to strike. My return smile was tight, a mask slipping into place. "The pool boy. Oh, you mean Jason? Seems nice enough, a bit quiet, but keeps the algae at bay, I suppose." Playing dumb was my best defense, but the flicker of uncertainty in my eyes must have betrayed me. Jenna was a shark smelling blood. Each innocuous question about him was laced with implications I couldn't fully refute. Had my carelessness been that obvious? Had a stolen glance at the pool, a touch that lingered too long, given us away? Jenna always prided herself on knowing what went on behind the manicured lawns of our street. If she suspected, if she had proof, well, the entire illusion I was clinging to by my fingernails could crumble. My husband's conveniently timed business trip felt like the universe taunting me. His voice on the phone, filled with the usual mix of patronizing concern and disinterest, was almost suffocating. Every, "be good," and "take care of yourself," felt like a noose tightening around my double life. Desperate times, desperate measures. Confronting the pool boy wasn't in my master plan, but Jenna had forced my hand. Was she blackmailing him? Had she used him to get to me? The flicker of fear I saw in his eyes when I demanded answers wasn't reassuring. That night, as the silence of the house pressed down on me, I did something almost as reckless as our poolside trysts. I went to his apartment. It wasn't about passion anymore. It was about self-preservation, about getting ahead of Jenna somehow. This place was pathetic, not what you'd expect from someone blackmailing a middle-aged housewife. No incriminating photos, no ledgers of my misdeeds. And then, the sting. A photo wedged into the bathroom mirror. Him and the girl, years older, their smiles radiating the kind of easy happiness I'd long ago forgotten. Jealousy hit first, hot and irrational, but it was quickly eclipsed by a cold realization. This was leverage. Jenna, with her obsession with propriety, with the image, would crumble if her darling social circle found out her golden pool boy had a serious girlfriend. The photo slipped into my bag felt heavier than a brick. I was walking a tightrope now, each step bringing me closer to the point where everything could come crashing down. Yet, with every tick of the clock, Jenna's visit loomed, the inevitable confrontation I now almost craved. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about me deciding if I'd let her call the shots, or finally take control of the game, even if it meant destroying the whole damn board. Jenna's arrival was as predictable as her perfectly pressed floral dress. We were the queens of passive aggression, every offer of tea or slice of lemon cake masking a landmine. My accidental, spilled purse, the photo sliding onto the pristine hardwood, felt ridiculously staged, yet perfectly satisfying. Watching her facade shatter was intoxicating. The fury, the hissed accusations, they bounced off me. It was exhilarating, knowing that beneath the veneer of concern, she was terrified. My feigned surprise, the batting of my eyelashes as I denied any knowledge of the photo. It was a performance I would deserve an Oscar for. The stalemate when she finally stormed out was more a ceasefire than a real ending. Jenna was dangerous because she was cornered. But for the first time since this mess started, I held the better hand. My husband stayed blessedly clueless. The pool boy was a question mark, a potential weak link. The aftermath felt like swallowing ash. But damn it, even ash was proof that something had burned brightly, even if only for a twisted, glorious moment. It started subtly, poison disguised as sweetness. A knowing glance from across the room at book club. Invitations that never came. The sudden lack of laughter at my slightly off-color jokes during tennis matches. Jenna was a master of the social kill, and I was her prime target. The whispers followed, like insidious ivy creeping over my once impeccable reputation. Have you heard about? She's always seemed a little unstable. Well, you know how these things go. My perfect cul-de-sac world was showing its cracks, and Jenna wielded the hammer with a practiced smile. Isolation bred a kind of madness in me. If they were going to see me as the villain, I might as well play the part with a damn flourish. Suddenly, lingering poolside chats seemed tame. I arranged rendezvous with the pool boy in places where discovery was a delicious possibility. The back booth of the town diner, the far corner of the hardware store parking lot. Each near miss fueled a recklessness that bordered on self-destruction. My husband, the great oblivious fool, finally noticed. Not the affair, of course, but the shift in the town's social dynamics. His inquiries were a mix of paternal concern and suspicion. Where did I disappear to during the day? Did I need to talk about something? The veiled accusations made me want to laugh at the sheer audacity of it all. Paranoia became my constant companion. Every rustle of bushes was Jenna spying. Every ringing phone was her delivering the final blow. The boundaries between reality and my own frantic delusions started to blur. Had I simply imagined that smirk on the cashier's face? Had that group of women at the grocery store actually fallen silent as I walked by? The pool boy, once my weapon of rebellion, was now an albatross. His hesitation, his mumbled excuses fueled by genuine fear of what Jenna could do to him and his girl. It was a splash of cold water when I was burning too brightly. I needed to force Jenna's hand. A text message, vitriol thinly masked as playful banter, designed to goad her into action, to make her escalate this from subtle social sabotage to full-blown warfare. Her reply was a masterpiece. An email to my husband, crafted innocence, feigned concern about an unhealthy obsession with the pool boy. Enough truth to ignite doubt, enough vagueness to make me sound delusional if I denied it. Confrontation was inevitable. My husband wasn't a yeller. He was far more dangerous when the fury went ice cold. He dissected our marriage, questioned my sanity, chipped away at the foundation of trust we'd never truly had. My performance was worthy of applause. Weeping denials, accusations of him being paranoid, the perfect wronged wife. But the seed Jenna had planted took root. He looked at me not with rage, but with a chilling analytical detachment, a scientist observing a lab specimen gone rogue. The staged encounter with the pool boy, our voices rising in a fabricated argument for my husband's benefit, should have sealed the deal. Yet, my victory was tainted with the knowledge that even if my husband believed I'd ended the affair, our marriage was damaged beyond repair. Jenna, of course, wasn't content with merely creating doubt. She wanted annihilation. The anonymous letter was the bomb that finally detonated our house of cards existence. Detailed, sorted, and with just enough verifiable facts to make the denials ring hollow. His explosion was everything I ever wanted. Yet it tasted like bile. The end of our charade, the final ripping of the mask, his fury was raw, animalistic. This wasn't just about an affair. It was about the humiliation, the realization that he'd been a fool in his own kingdom for years. And I had held the match. Numbness pervaded everything. The taste of coffee was ash. The once bright sunlight felt like a harsh interrogation lamp. In some dark corner of my soul, a flicker of twisted satisfaction fought for dominance. Hadn't this implosion been the goal? Now, faced with the charred ruins of my scorched earth victory, all I felt was a profound emptiness. The world went on without me. News of the pool boy's very public brawl with my husband had likely reached the far corners of the state by now. A fistfight in a grocery store, so deliciously low class, the perfect fuel for the town's ravenous gossip mill. The pool boy, the pawn I'd wielded so carelessly, had vanished. His girlfriend likely spirited him away, a casualty in my war. And Jenna, the architect of my social downfall, she too had disappeared. Perhaps even she finally understood that in a scorched earth landscape, there are no true winners. Or perhaps she was simply waiting, ready to deliver the final blow when I was at my absolute weakest. Divorce proceedings. Usually the words would send shivers down most wives' spines, especially in my age bracket. But there was no fear left, just a chilling efficiency as my husband carved up the life we'd built. This house, once my pride and joy, now felt like a mausoleum, every tasteful throw pillow a testament to my catastrophic failure. The pool boy's apartment was my own personal ghost tour. Empty, the only evidence of his life, a faded water stain on the ceiling, and the lingering cheap scent of air freshener. It was a bleak mirror to my own existence. Had this been my goal all along? To destroy not just my marriage, but everyone around me in the process? There were 3 paths laid out before me, each bleak in its own way. Sell up, disappear into the anonymity of a new town, carry the weight of shame like an invisible scarlet letter. Stay, become the whispered about pariah, the divorcee who'd lost her mind for the pool boy. Or, was there a third option, a flicker of defiance remaining in the ashes? Sarah, it was almost laughable, the mousy church volunteer, always ready with a baked good and a sympathetic smile. Yet, there she was, on my doorstep, her casserole dish a bizarre peace offering. I know, her words were a bomb that detonated what little composure I had left. Jenna, it turned out, was a mere foot soldier. The mastermind was my own husband. My affair, the catalyst. His concerned emails, the careful undermining of my standing in the community, a strategy, not born of wounded pride, but coldly calculated greed. The rage that ignited wasn't a cleansing fire, but a poison seeping into my veins. And Sarah, always underestimated Sarah, she fueled it. She knew, had always known, about his little indiscretions, the creatively hidden assets. The knowledge laid out before me was a weapon far more potent than any summer fling. So, here I stood at the precipice. Run, stay. Those felt like the choices of the woman I used to be. This new creature, forged in the crucible of betrayal, well, she was far more interested in playing the game by a whole new set of rules. And with the knowledge Sarah provided, for the first time in years, I was the one holding all the cards. A smile crept across my face, the first genuine one in months. The reflection in the bathroom mirror was a stranger, disheveled hair, a subtle tremor in my hand. It was perfect, because the world wasn't supposed to see the cunning strategist. They were meant to see the shattered, unstable woman. My performance started subtly. A panicked phone call to a friend. My voice purposefully just a bit too loud, filled with nonsensical worries about misplaced keys, about shadows I kept seeing. A well-timed sobbing breakdown in the organic aisle of the grocery store. Each act was a brush stroke on the masterpiece I was creating, the unraveling of my very sanity. Sarah was my weapon, her whispers far more potent than any open attack. Strategic mentions of my mother's breakdown. After my father left. A concerned sigh as she dropped off another casserole and spoke about how stress can bring out the worst in people. The rumor mill, once fueled by the salacious details of my affair, now churned with a far more effective narrative. I wasn't just unstable, I was a danger to myself. The lawyer I chose was the opposite of my husband's usual sharks. Soft-spoken, a bit disheveled, the kind who inspired pity rather than fear. Each tearful recounting of my husband's cruelty, each time I appeared overwhelmed by the legal complexities, played perfectly into his hands. Of course, I understood every clause of those contracts, knew exactly which loopholes my husband thought he'd cleverly exploited. It was all part of the play. With each overture, my husband grew bolder. His confidence was sickening, yet oh so useful. He pushed for a quick divorce, eager to be rid of his damaged goods before I could cause any further embarrassment. He offered a settlement, generous in his eyes, a pittance considering what I knew. Signing those papers, hands shaking convincingly, was the pinnacle of my performance. He practically beamed with self-satisfaction, blind to the fact that from that moment on, the hunter became the hunted. The day the divorce was finalized was the day his meticulous empire began unraveling. News of the irregularities wasn't a leak, it was a detonation. Bank records, falsified documents, all carefully compiled and released from an anonymous source that, frustratingly, no investigator could seem to trace back to me. My mental health retreat was more a war room than spa. His lawyers descended, their threats bouncing off the shield of my strategically timed panic attacks and convenient memory lapses. And when the state investigators became involved, well, who would question the frantic wife who seemed one step away from a padded room? His downfall was brutal to watch. And yes, a part of me found a twisted satisfaction in his ruin. Yet, the woman coordinating the attack from her silk-sheeted suite was no victim. She was a player, someone who'd learned to use the world's underestimation of her as ruthlessly as any cutthroat businessman. Jenna's reappearance was interesting. A tentative email, filled with a mix of carefully worded apologies and hints that she, too, felt used by my husband. Was it genuine? Who cared? An enemy of my enemy was a potential ally, and in this new game I was playing, allies could be valuable pieces on the board. The pool boy became a phone call away. No more passionate rendezvous, just a business deal. His experience, his connections in the industry I had a feeling our little pool cleaning venture would be quite profitable. He was useful, malleable, and perhaps held a lingering gratitude towards the woman who'd unintentionally set him free from the drudgery of college fund skimming. In the quiet moments, alone with my untouched aromatherapy candles and 5-star room service, the true face of victory stares back at me. It's a face I barely recognize. Hard, calculating, devoid of the naivete I once clung to. Have I won? Undeniably, I should have known something was up when my husband started taking his phone to the bathroom. I mean, who needs their phone for a 5-minute pee break? But there I was, clueless, happily chopping veggies for dinner on a regular Wednesday evening. The kids were playing in the living room, the TV was humming in the background, and I was about to become a walking, talking cliche copyright. As I stirred the pot on the stove, my husband's phone buzzed on the counter. Instinctively, I glanced over. Just a quick peek, I told myself. And there it was. The message that would flip my world upside down. Can't wait to see you tonight, babe. Jessica kiss mark. Jessica? Who the hell was Jessica? My hands trembled as I unlocked his phone. I mean, he made it so easy, no passcode, like he thought I'd never check. As I scrolled through the messages, my heart pounded louder than the chopping on my cutting board. There it was in black and white. An affair unfolding through emojis and late-night texts. When he walked in, smelling like beer and bad decisions, I confronted him. Who's Jessica? I demanded, waving his phone in his face. At first, he played dumb, acting like I was imagining things. But as I shoved the screen in his face, his mask slipped. He shrugged, and with a smirk said, "It's not what you think." Oh, really? So what is it then? A book club? I snapped back. He sighed, realizing he was caught. Okay, fine. I messed up, he admitted, looking more annoyed than guilty. His nonchalant attitude felt like a slap in the face. I needed to hurt him like he'd hurt me. The next day, I poured my heart out to Lisa, my best friend and partner in crime. What do I do, Lee? I asked, barely holding back tears. Lisa, ever the creative genius, leaned in with a glint in her eye. You want to get back at him? Let his friends use you while he watches. That'll teach him. At first, I thought she was nuts. But the more I thought about it, the more sense it made. Hit him where it hurts. Make him feel the betrayal up close. With Lisa egging me on, I started to pay attention to his friends, Mike, Tom, and Dave. They were always around, drinking his beer, watching his games. During a casual get-together, I decided to test the waters. I flirted with Mike, just to see his reaction. A touch here, a smile there. He responded. Oh boy, did he respond? It gave me the confidence I needed. The next weekend, I planned a poker night at her place. Special dinner, sexy dress, the works. I made sure my husband and his buddies were there, liquored up and ready for a good time. As the night went on and the drinks flowed, I started to make my moves. Subtle touches, whispered jokes. My husband noticed, but he was too into his game to care. I could feel the tension rising, a mix of anticipation and revenge bubbling inside me. It was going to be a night they'd never forget, and neither would he. I could feel the electricity in the air as the poker game wrapped up. The guys were on their third round of drinks, and my husband was already looking a bit tipsy. Perfect. I plastered on my most inviting smile and leaned in, just enough to give a peek of cleavage, and said, Hey, why don't you guys stay a little longer? I've got a more interesting game in mind. Their curiosity was piqued, exactly as I'd hoped. They exchanged glances, a mix of surprise and excitement. The alcohol made them more open to suggestion, and they all agreed eagerly. My husband, oblivious or just too drunk to protest, didn't say a word. All right, let's play truth or dare, I announced, adding a playful wink. The room buzzed with anticipation. The first few rounds were innocent enough, but I knew exactly how to turn up the heat. When it was Mike's turn, I locked eyes with him and dared him to kiss me passionately in front of everyone. Mike hesitated for just a second before leaning in. The kiss was long and deep, his hands on my waist, pulling me closer. The room fell silent, all eyes on us. When we finally broke apart, the atmosphere had changed entirely. The tension was thick, and I could feel my husband's eyes burning holes into the back of my head. The kiss set the tone for the rest of the night. I kept pushing the boundaries, each dare more provocative than the last. When it was Tom's turn, I dared him to touch me intimately. He complied, his hands trailing up my thighs, the other men watching intently. The mix of anger and arousal in my husband's eyes was delicious. He was clearly torn, too shocked to stop us, but unable to look away. Your turn, Dave, I said, my voice low and seductive. I dare you to undress me. The room held its breath. Dave stepped forward, his hands shaking slightly as he reached for my dress. He hesitated, glancing at my husband, but my silent nod urged him on. Soon, Tom and Mike joined in, their hands stripping away my clothes. I stood there, exposed and vulnerable, yet strangely empowered. The men's eyes roamed over my body, their desire palpable. My husband's face was a mix of rage and helplessness. I was making him feel the pain I felt, but there was also an unexpected thrill in the power I held over them all. As the night grew more intense, the lines blurred between revenge and pleasure. I could see my plan working, the silent torment on my husband's face mingling with the raw lust of his friends. And for the first time in a long while, I felt in control. Ever wondered how far you could push someone before they break? Yeah, I found out that night. With my husband's eyes burning holes into me, Mike took the lead. He undressed himself slowly, savoring the moment, and then guided me to the couch. The atmosphere was electric, a mix of anticipation and raw attention. It was like watching a storm build up, knowing it would either be exhilarating or disastrous. Mike's hands were the first to explore my body, his touch both tentative and bold. The others watched, their gazes hot and hungry. My husband's face turned an alarming shade of red, a bizarre mix of rage and arousal. Part of me wondered if he'd explode or just sit there, paralyzed by the spectacle. Tom and Dave weren't far behind. They joined in, their hands and mouths mapping out every inch of me. It was intense, surreal even. The betrayal I felt from my husband's affair with Jessica seemed to pale in comparison to what was happening now. It was vindication, served cold and raw. The men took turns pleasuring me, each trying to outdo the other. The room was filled with the sounds of heavy breathing, moans, and the occasional gasp. It was like a symphony of sins, every note striking a chord deep within me. My husband, poor bastard, looked like he was about to either punch someone or cry, but he just stood there, watching, a silent witness to his own downfall. Finally, he couldn't take it anymore. "Stop it, enough," he shouted, his voice cracking with a mix of anger and desperation. But the men ignored him. They were emboldened by my participation, my enthusiasm. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about taking back control, about rewriting the narrative of my own life. The night ended with all three of them taking me in turns, their relentless actions leaving me exhausted yet strangely satisfied. I felt powerful, in control of my own destiny for the first time in ages. My husband watched the entire time, his face a twisted mask of emotions, anger, helplessness, and something else. Maybe he was beginning to understand the pain of betrayal, the gut-wrenching agony of being powerless. As I lay there, catching my breath, I couldn't help but reflect on how far we'd come from that ordinary Wednesday night. What started as a simple act of revenge had spiraled into something much more complex. And I had a feeling this was just the beginning. Ever had one of those mornings where you wake up and realize you've set your life on fire? Yeah, that was me. The sunlight filtered through the curtains, and I knew today would be the start of a whole new mess. My husband was already up, his face a storm of emotions. "So, that's your idea of revenge?" He spat, pacing the kitchen like a caged animal. I sipped my coffee, trying to look as nonchalant as possible. Inside, my heart was pounding. "You cheated first," I shot back, my voice colder than I felt. "You don't get to play the victim here." He was furious, but he also seemed shaken by what he had witnessed. Seeing me with his friends had clearly messed with his head, and, in a twisted way, that gave me a sense of grim satisfaction. It was about time he felt the sting of betrayal. Days turned into weeks, and the awkwardness at home became the new normal. Strangely, my husband's friends started visiting more often. Maybe they enjoyed the thrill of the new dynamic, or perhaps they just liked watching him squirm. Whatever the reason, they were around a lot more, and they didn't hide their interest in me. One evening, Tom cornered me in the kitchen. "We should continue what we started," he whispered, his hand brushing against my arm. The challenge in his eyes was unmistakable. I agreed, knowing it would drive my husband insane. Tom and I had our secret encounter while my husband was in the next room. The thrill of the situation was intoxicating, and I found myself enjoying the power I held over them all. It was a dangerous game, but I was all in. It didn't take long for Dave to follow suit. He approached me with the same proposition, and we had our own tryst. The secret meetings added a layer of excitement to my life that I hadn't felt in years. Each encounter further complicated the dynamics within our group, but I didn't care. I was addicted to the rush. Mike, not wanting to be left out, made his move as well. Our encounters became more frequent, each one more daring than the last. My husband's frustration grew with every passing day, and I reveled in the attention and power I wielded. It was exhilarating, knowing I could drive him to the brink of madness with just a look or a touch. But then, I started noticing a change in my husband. He became more withdrawn, his eyes always watching me, filled with suspicion. He was quieter, more introspective, like he was plotting something. It made me uneasy. I had pushed him to his limits, and now I wondered how far he would go to regain control. One night, after another intense encounter with Mike, I caught my husband staring at me from the shadows. His eyes were dark, filled with a mix of anger and something else I couldn't quite place. For the first time, I felt a flicker of fear. Had I gone too far? As I lay in bed that night, my mind raced. This was no longer just about revenge. It had become a twisted game of power and control, and I was at the center of it all. I had to be careful. My husband was unpredictable, and I knew he wouldn't stay passive for long. The thrill of my actions was still there, but now it was tinged with a sense of foreboding. I had started a fire, and I wasn't sure I could control the blaze. Ever felt like you were in a high-stakes game with no idea who's winning? That was my life now. My husband's growing paranoia was like a ticking time bomb, and our arguments became a daily occurrence. He'd accuse me of destroying our marriage, but I always shot back, reminding him that his infidelity had started this whole mess. It was a bitter, never-ending cycle. One evening, he pulled a move I hadn't seen coming. He invited Jessica over. Yeah, that Jessica. He wanted me to feel the same pain he had experienced. The moment she walked in, I felt my blood boil. This wasn't just a game anymore, it was war. The tension in the room was palpable. Jessica had the nerve to act all innocent, like she wasn't the reason we were in this mess. I confronted her, and it quickly escalated into a shouting match. She had a sharp tongue, and I had a lot of pent-up anger. My husband stood back, watching with a twisted smile. He was getting off on our confrontation, the bastard. Despite the chaos Jessica brought, my encounters with my husband's friends continued. Each meeting was a mix of pleasure and revenge, and my emotions were a tangled mess. The lines between right and wrong blurred more each day. Lisa, my rock through all of this, was always there with new ideas to escalate the situation. She seemed to revel in the drama as much as I did. One night, she suggested we up the ante. Why not a group encounter? She said, her eyes gleaming with excitement. The idea thrilled me. It was the perfect way to push my husband's limits even further. We arranged for a gathering at Lisa's place. The anticipation was electrifying. When the night arrived, the atmosphere was wild and uninhibited. My husband's friends and I indulged in our desires with Lisa joining us, adding an extra layer of excitement. My husband watched from the sidelines, his face a mask of rage and helplessness. He was completely powerless, and that realization was intoxicating. As the night went on, I found myself lost in the moment. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about exploring parts of myself I never knew existed. The power, the attention, the raw emotion. It was a heady mix that left me craving more. But amid the chaos, there was a nagging doubt in the back of my mind. Had I gone too far? What if my husband decided to retaliate in a way I couldn't control? The thrill of the game was starting to wear thin, replaced by a growing sense of unease. I knew one thing for sure. Whatever came next, there was no turning back. The fire I had started was now a raging inferno, and I was right in the middle of it, with no way out. Ever wonder what happens when a volcano finally erupts? Well, that's pretty much how things exploded at home. My husband's frustration had been simmering for weeks, and it finally reached a boiling point. He confronted me, his face twisted with anger. "This stops now," he yelled. "You're ruining everything." I looked at him, unfazed. "Oh, I'm ruining everything? You started this, remember? With Jessica?" His face fell. the weight of his own betrayal hitting him once again. But I wasn't going to let him off easy. In a desperate attempt to regain some semblance of control, he did something I never saw coming. He revealed his affair with Jessica to his friends, hoping to shame them or maybe to win back some respect. The room fell silent, the shock was palpable, but instead of turning on me, his friends looked at him with a mix of disbelief and pity. Their desire for me didn't wane. If anything, it intensified. They saw him as weak, unworthy of their loyalty. The power dynamics had shifted completely. My husband's friends began to openly pursue me, enjoying the thrill of our secret encounters. I found myself relishing the power I held over them, using my sexuality to manipulate and control the situation. Meanwhile, my husband became more isolated and paranoid, watching helplessly as the people he once considered friends betrayed him. The tension in our group finally reached a breaking point one evening when my husband caught Mike and me in the act. I could see the rage building in his eyes, a storm about to break. He lunged at Mike, fists flying, and the two of them crashed into the furniture, knocking over everything in their path. "Get your hands off her," my husband roared, his voice a mix of anger and desperation. But Mike was stronger, and the fight ended with my husband on the floor, humiliated and beaten. His friends didn't come to his aid. Instead, they began to openly mock him, further diminishing his standing in the group. The man who once held all the power was now a broken shell, left to watch as his world crumbled around him. Realizing he had lost control completely, my husband reluctantly accepted the new reality. He became a silent observer, his anger and frustration evident in every interaction. He watched as his friends shared me, powerless to stop it. It was a twisted, dark victory for me, but a victory nonetheless. As I lay in bed that night, reflecting on the chaos that had become my life, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of unease. I had won the battle, but at what cost? The fire I had ignited had burned everything to the ground, leaving nothing but ashes and a hollow sense of power. The thrill of revenge had long since faded, replaced by a gnawing emptiness. I had played the game and come out on top, but the victory felt hollow. My husband's friends were still drawn to me, but the excitement had dulled, replaced by a routine that felt more like a prison than a playground. I knew that something had to change. The path I was on could only lead to more destruction, and I was beginning to tire of the endless cycle of power and humiliation. But the question remained: how do you put out a fire once it's raging out of control? The answer, I feared, was not going to be an easy one to find. You ever wake up and realize your life has turned into a bizarre soap opera? That was me, every single day. Our new normal involved frequent visits from my husband's friends. They were like clockwork, showing up almost every evening, turning our home into a playground for their desires. It was a twisted game we played, and somehow, it had become routine. My husband's resentment grew with each passing day, but he seemed resigned to his fate. He continued to watch, his eyes a mixture of anger and helplessness. It was like he was a prisoner in his own home, forced to witness the consequences of his betrayal. Despite the chaos swirling around us, I found a strange sense of satisfaction in the situation. I enjoyed the attention, the power I held over these men. It was intoxicating, like a drug I couldn't quit. Every touch, every stolen kiss, was a reminder that I was in control. Lisa, ever the instigator, wasn't satisfied with just my husband's friends. "Why stop there?" she said one night, a devilish grin on her face. "Let's involve other men. Expand your horizons." The idea excited me, the prospect of new possibilities igniting a spark of thrill. I started visiting clubs and bars, seeking out new partners to bring into our twisted dynamic. At first, my husband's friends were wary, unsure of these new additions, but they soon embraced the change, enjoying the fresh energy and variety. Our gatherings became larger, more extravagant. It was like living in a never-ending party. New men joined in the fun, bringing a fresh perspective to our encounters. My husband continued to watch, his humiliation growing with each new face. It was almost pitiful, the way he sat there, powerless to stop what he had set in motion. The new men brought a vibrancy to our meetings, a wild and uninhibited energy that I found myself increasingly drawn to. It was as if each encounter was a new adventure, pushing boundaries and exploring desires I hadn't known I had. One night, as I lay in bed after another wild evening, I reflected on how much my life had changed. From the betrayal that had shattered my world to this new, chaotic normal. It was a journey I never could have anticipated. And yet, here I was, thriving in the madness. But as thrilling as it all was, there was still a nagging doubt in the back of my mind. How long could this go on? How far could I push the boundaries before something snapped? The thrill of the game was still there, but so was the ever-present question, what happens next? The fire I had started had turned into an inferno, consuming everything in its path. And while I reveled in the power and attention, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was dancing on the edge of a precipice. One wrong move, and everything could come crashing down. For now, though, I chose to ignore the doubts, focusing instead on the exhilaration of the moment. I was in control, and I wasn't ready to give that up just yet. The new normal was wild, unpredictable, and utterly intoxicating. And as long as I could keep the flames from consuming me, I intended to enjoy every second of it. You ever feel the thrill of walking a tightrope over a pit of flames, knowing one wrong move could send you plunging into chaos? That was my life now. Our gatherings were getting more intense, the risks higher. My husband, unable to bear the humiliation any longer, started plotting his revenge. And boy, did he have a plan. He must have spent weeks setting it all up. Discreetly, he installed cameras around the house, capturing every explicit detail of our encounters. I had no idea he was capable of such deviousness. The man who couldn't even remember our anniversary had managed to pull off a covert operation right under my nose. His revenge was a masterpiece of pettiness. He compiled the footage into a damning video, an explicit highlight reel of my infidelities, and anonymously sent it to our neighbors and friends. It was his way of shaming me and his so-called friends, exposing our secret life to the public. The fallout was immediate. The whispers started almost instantly. Our social circle was in shock, the scandal spreading like wildfire. My husband watched with a smug satisfaction as our reputation crumbled. He thought he had won, that he had finally regained control. But he underestimated me. Mike, Tom, and Dave were furious, feeling utterly betrayed by my husband's actions. They confronted him, resulting in another physical altercation that left my husband bruised and beaten. The scene was almost comical in its absurdity. The man who had tried to destroy us was now the one lying on the floor, a pitiful reminder of his own failures. Despite the public humiliation, I found an unexpected sense of liberation. The secret was out, and I no longer had to hide my desires or my actions. There was a strange freedom in being exposed, a weight lifted off my shoulders. Lisa, always the ever-supportive instigator, saw an opportunity. Why not turn this to our advantage? She suggested one night, a gleam in her eye. Let's create a private club for those interested in similar experiences. The idea was brilliant. We began organizing exclusive gatherings, inviting only those we trusted. The club quickly grew, attracting a diverse group of people eager to explore their fantasies. Our gatherings became more organized, more elaborate, each one a celebration of freedom and desire. In a strange twist of fate, my husband's attempt to destroy us had only made us stronger. The humiliation he intended to inflict turned into a badge of honor. Our club thrived, a testament to resilience and the power of owning one's truth. I had turned his betrayal into my liberation, transforming our shattered lives into something new and exciting. As I stood in the midst of one of our gatherings, watching the laughter and excitement around me, I felt a sense of pride. I had navigated the flames, walked the tightrope, and come out the other side stronger. My husband, now a shadow of his former self, could only watch as I continued to rise from the ashes. And as for me, I was just getting started. You know you've really hit rock bottom when your greatest achievement is turning your husband's betrayal into a thriving private club. Our gatherings provided a safe space for exploration and indulgence, and it quickly became apparent that this was my new normal. My husband, still seething with bitterness, had been relegated to a mere observer, his anger simmering beneath the surface like a volcano ready to erupt. Our club attracted new members, each bringing their unique desires and dynamics. It was fascinating to see the variety of people drawn to our little haven of hedonism. My husband's friends continued to participate, enjoying the new variety and the thrill of the expanded group. I naturally became the unofficial leader of the club, organizing events, ensuring everyone felt welcome. It was empowering. My husband watched from the sidelines, his resentment growing with each passing day. It was almost pitiful, but I had little sympathy left for him. One evening, a new member named James caught my eye. His confidence and charm were irresistible. There was an immediate spark between us, and we quickly formed a connection. James had an energy and enthusiasm that reignited my own desires, making me feel alive in a way I hadn't in years. Our passionate encounter didn't go unnoticed. My husband's friends saw the change in me and became increasingly competitive for my attention. It was amusing to watch them try to outdo each other, each man desperate to be the one who pleased me the most. My husband watched helplessly as his friends continued to betray him, each new affair another nail in the coffin of his dignity. Lisa, ever the mastermind, suggested we celebrate our club's success with a grand event, a night of unrestrained indulgence for all our members. The idea excited everyone, and we dove into planning. Invitations were sent, the atmosphere buzzing with anticipation. The night of the event arrived, and it was electric. Members mingled and explored, the air thick with desire. It was a carnival of decadence, each corner of the house a stage for someone's fantasy. Of course, my husband couldn't let it go. In a desperate attempt to regain control, he confronted James. "You're trying to steal her away from me," he accused, his voice cracking with a mix of rage and desperation. James, unfazed, laughed off my husband's accusations. "Steal her away? You already lost her, mate," he said, his voice dripping with contempt. The crowd watched with a mix of amusement and pity, my husband's humiliation complete. Fueled by anger, my husband tried to disrupt the event, his actions wild and erratic. But Lisa and I quickly intervened, removing him from the premises. His outburst only served to solidify my resolve, the night's success untainted by his desperate attempt at sabotage. The event continued without a hitch, each moment a celebration of freedom and desire. I felt more empowered than ever, my husband's attempts to regain control only strengthening my resolve. As the night ended and the members began to leave, I found a quiet moment to reflect on the journey. From my husband's betrayal to my own revenge, I had transformed into a woman who embraced her desires and wielded her power unapologetically. The fire that had once threatened to consume me had become a beacon of strength, guiding me through the chaos and into a future where I was in control. Standing there, amidst the remnants of our wild night, I felt a sense of closure. My husband's betrayal had sparked a journey of self-discovery